And we're back. We are here now to talk about some. We were talking about some bad stuff in the video game industry before when it came to broken PC ports. But now let's talk about some maybe not bad, but maybe not great, disturbing trends happening in the games industry. One of the things we'd like to talk about is just the state of the storied company Konami. Maker, developer, publisher of such classics as Castlevania, Metal Gear Solid, Suikoden, Pro Evolution Soccer. They're also the owners of the entire catalog of Hudson games, which includes such gems as Adventure Island.
Adventure Island 2 for fucking life. I'm sorry, keep going.
Well, the problem is since Konami owns it, that life is very, very short probably, unless you think that maybe one day it'll be put on a slot machine.
Hudson Soft is also Bomberman, isn't it?
Yes, but I think they sold. Actually, no, they still might own that because I think there's a Bomberman on phones, which is probably the only way we'll ever see Bomberman again.
So a lot of those games on that list, when you start off with Castlevania, right?
Yeah.
That directly relates to me. I grew up with Castlevania 1, Castlevania 2, Castlevania 3, Super Castlevania 4, Castlevania Bloodlines, Castlevania Symphony. I literally played Castlevania from the beginning all the way through until its recent departure. I hated Lords of Shadow 2. I love Lords of Shadow 1.
Okay, so you like the first one.
I like the first one.
So you pressed Y to call Zobek and you were fine with that.
Here's the thing. I did not play God of War. I didn't play a lot of Devil May Cry, but I played a little bit. So I wasn't super familiar with that type of action game.
You didn't have like the reductionist aspect.
Exactly. I just looked at it and I said, wow, this game is fun. It plays well. It's a 3D, action game, and it's good.
Well, now you know that wasn't made by Konami, right? It was made by like
Mercury Steam.
Yeah, Spanish studio?
Mercury Steam, yeah.
Now
Spain.
They're in Spain. I never knew if they were Latin American Spanish or Spain Spanish.
No, the game itself was great. Not that we're going to go directly at Lords of Shadow. Lords of Shadow 1 was decent. I hated the DS game, 3DS game.
That got up-res to...
It was just crap. The whole game all around, it was just absolute shit. But Lords of Shadow 2 was also just completely disappointing. You mean...
The CEO would disagree with you.
I would like to tell you that I'm now Dracula. I am the Lord of the Night. I will come and suck the blood out of all the babies on the planet, but I have to hide from every single enemy I see for the first half hour of that fucking game.
Well, that's why you're sucking the blood out of babies.
Exactly.
Because everyone else proves to be a challenge.
So they've really just taken a shit with the Castlevania series.
Well, but okay, again though, that wasn't even them making it. When you what was their last Konami-based one? Order of Ecclesia on the DS?
Order of Ecclesia.
That was good.
Koji Igarashi, phenomenal game. It had tons of aspects in it that were just different enough from the previous DS titles.
Well, Portrait of Ruin was the one before that. And that was almost too easy, whereas Order of Ecclesia actually provided a challenge.
They're all good in their own ways, from the Game Boy Advance games on, because they're all Metroidvanias. They all have their own nuances and different positive points. I can tell you right now, I beat Order of Ecclesia with a level 1 Shinoa. Level 1 Shinoa on hard mode. Any hit kills you. I mean any hit, which means I had to perfect every single boss in the game. I loved the fuck out of that game. It was perfect. But then they pull Iga, and they put him on some mobile games.
Well, that was also where he was like either that or dating sims where he started.
They really screwed up by pulling him off, and then like you said, they basically said, hey, go make a new Castlevania on Mercury Steam.
Yeah, well, I think they felt like they couldn't really do anything more with the story. I mean, because if you look through even just through the Iga games, starting with Symphony of the Night, like they've gone through like a lot of time, and they were almost getting to the point now, like how do we fill in these gaps without like contradicting ourselves way too much?
In the storyline, there's one more title remaining, which they still have not touched in that original Castlevania story, which is the Battle of 1999.
Oh, the Julius Belmont.
Julius Belmont's battle against Dracula, which is where he supposedly kills him forever, which is why he's reincarnated as Soma with his abilities.
Yeah.
So the goal was to actually if they had just finished it right there and then the reboot, Lords of Shadow would have come out, I think the fan base would have been a lot happier.
And by the way, people listening, I bet you didn't think that this was going to turn into the Castlevania cast. We are going deep with lore.
I am such a huge Castlevania fan. This is like, I'll end off on, they should have finished off that, and then
I'm admittedly a pretty big Iga Vania fan in the sense that I played the Castlevanias as a kid, like the older ones. They didn't really grab me, especially 2, because the translation just made no sense at points. As a kid, I was too dumb to figure it out. I mean, Zelda I could figure out as a kid, even when the guys just saying grumble, grumble. But, like, having to stand at a waterfall for, like, 45 seconds or whatever, that was kind of beyond me, and there was no game facts at the time. So, yeah, starting a Symphony of the Night, especially being the big RPG fan I am, I was able to dive into that and really get in with it. I did like the 200.2, 200.6% or whatever it was in Symphony of the Night. I beat the Richter mode. I played all the GBA ones. I played all the DS ones. And I think that probably even the best one is Dawn of Sorrow for the DS, because it took everything good about Aria, made it better, and then added the stupid drawing mechanic.
All right, so, I mean, to digress a bit, the state of Konami, not necessarily intrinsically tied with Castlevania specific.
Yes, we did
This is just a disappointing.
Right. You guys indulged a little bit.
We
This
let
is
ourselves
fine.
orgasm a bit.
But I don't want to say that it's actually the quality of Konami's games that put them in this situation, because, I mean, the Metal Gear franchise has always been very successful.
Well, because
And
they
there's
put
no-
piles of money at it, and Kojima's a crazy person.
Yeah, but it's always been a commercial success. And the last Castlevania game, what have you, but they have a lot of, and they proved that they could still make good stuff. Like they made Hardcore on the Xbox 360, right? Which was why they didn't name it Contra, beyond me, but it's not that they can't make good games anymore.
Suikoden 5 on the PS2 was phenomenal.
But I think it's more just the way Japan is going right now, and they're a Japanese company.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
they're definitely. Well, I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but most Japanese companies, especially ones in video games, that's not all they do. Japanese companies tend to have very diversified portfolios. Like for a while, I think back in the 70s, Nintendo owned some love hotels, which are basically by-the-hour motels.
Yeah.
Konami owns a set of fitness clubs in Japan, and they have a big business in parlor games, specifically pachinko games and slot machines.
So the discussion then becomes not what's best for Konami, but where is the line drawn with maintaining these beloved IPs for us gamers? How important is it in truth? It's very important to us. Perhaps not so much to Konami, who sees Metal Gear and Silent Hill and Castlevania and all the others as just IPs that they can use.
They're just paychecks to them. That's the problem at this point.
Well, in that vein, let's kind of go through some of their bigger properties just with each other quickly, like couple word answer, not just what we just did about Castlevania. And what would you hope quickly for the future of the franchise? Like, I'm just going to start with myself, for instance. Metal Gear Solid, it seems perfectly obvious to anyone who reads any sort of internet news about video games that Hideo Kojima is not going to be with Konami after Metal Gear Solid 5 ships. So I hope that they just let the series die. I hope that Metal Gear Solid 5 is the game in which it all comes full circle, and that the next point in the series would be Metal Gear for the NES.
Well, that's chronologically correct.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see a remake of, like, Twin Snake style remake of the original Metal Gear to have it really come full circle.
Okay, but a remake could actually happen, because then you don't even necessarily need the creative input of someone like Kojima.
Fine, but I want that maybe selfishly. Kojima kind of was saying for a long time, Kojima is very similar to for Sakurai.
Oh, Sakurai.
Because
I'm done.
right, this is going to be my magnum opus. This is the swan song for the series. All right, well this one is. All right, well this one is. And imagine how incredibly frustrating it must be to have your baby, right, and then to try to keep putting it to bed, and then to keep being forced to make another one, and then in the midst of making the penultimate Metal Gear Solid game, to have the rug just pulled out from underneath you, to have your name taken off of it, and said, we don't want to go this direction anymore. but you guys made me do this in the first place, so it's no wonder that Kojima wants to leave. I would want to leave in that situation. And this is what's shocking to me, is that these Japanese developers would be so disrespectful to their kind of all-stars, as far as game design and game development. Well, these are legends in the industry.
Kojima has some certain idiosyncrasies also. His games have a tendency to go wildly over budget. I mean, you want to talk about like legendary developers, you have like Sakurai and stuff like that. He can pump out Smash Bros. After Smash Brothers, like, sleeping in the office or whatever, but he doesn't seem to go over budget with the games. Whereas Hideo Kojima obviously wants to make a movie, with like a movie-like budget.
I'll defend. You're not wrong. Yes, he definitely gets carried away, but he always manages to find some sort of innovation that he adds to the game, which always seems to have paid off. Now, it's fine that that Konami decides that this isn't where they're going anymore. It's just how they handled it.
Okay, so let's, like I said, let's try to keep it brief. So basically, you said you want some sort of like remake of maybe of some Metal Gear Solid.
That's a selfish want. I would like to see it come full
that's
circle.
what I'm asking for. I'm asking for what is your
desire? Yeah.
Right.
So that's totally fine. Steve, pick a franchise.
Oh, it's Castlevania, and I have.
What do you want them to do with it?
Two different choices. Either of these could happen. One of them almost already has. I would like them to either sell the Castlevania IP.
Who do you want them to sell it
to? Igarashi or Nintendo, because Nintendo would do it right, I feel. Either of those options. Or they could just develop the Battle of 1999 for Castlevania and call it a day and just say, hey, we're
handheld like the others.
And just it could be a handheld, it could be a full game, it doesn't matter. Just finish the series. At least this way we have our ending of Dracula in the physical sense.
For that story.
For that story.
For the people who follow it.
Exactly. Just put it to bed. Finish it. Or sell it. Either of those options would be great.
Okay, now you want to sell to Igarashi. That would be your number one desire. Number two would be Nintendo, you said?
Nintendo, if not Igarashi. Igarashi would buy it.
I have a thought like this for one of my beloved series. Now, I've said it before, I'm a huge JRPG fan. Before Persona 4 stole my heart, my favorite game of all time was Suikoden 2.
Mm-hmm.
A Konami product. I think the Suikoden games are fantastic. I still have my disc of the PS1 Suikoden 2, which I could still sell on eBay disc alone for like $90 to $100, even though it finally came out on PSN. Like, I actually am part of the Facebook group, the Suikoden Revival movement. Like, I want to see the game put on PSN. Suikoden 3 was finally put out on PSN. It looks like Konami is at least doing right somewhat with the back catalog, but I know they're never going to make a new Suikoden game because they were not big sellers. They were never Metal Gear. They were never Castlevania. They're extremely niche. They're extremely long. They take a lot to make, probably a lot more money than it's worth. So I want them to sell it specifically to Sony, because I feel like Sony
would do it right. Yeah,
would do it right, and especially with what we were talking about last week with the whole E3 thing, they're in it for the hearts and minds. They're willing to, it seems like, maybe make a weird decision from a pure financial standpoint if they think it will pay them dividends in the consumer mind share.
They're willing to fund Street Fighter V's development to have Street Fighter V be an exclusive title. So,
well, it wouldn't have happened with that. It wouldn't even been exclusive because it would have been non-existent.
Exactly. But that's a great business decision.
Yeah, they're essentially becoming then the purveyors of Evo to come.
Well, that's one of the things that's kind of important is that for Capcom, Ultra Street Fighter, Street Fighter Arcade, all those different Street Fighter 4 versions were all played on the Xbox 360. That must have pained Sony to see that at every single competition. You've got these guys who are playing with Xbox 360 controllers and arcade sticks when you could have had them up there playing with Sony products, playing on Sony system, all this different stuff. That's a huge, huge amount of money.
Sidebar, it is an interesting note to say that MKX is played on PS4s in tournaments. And a lot of players, again, sidebar, because it's a very young generation as far as the fighting scene is concerned, a lot of them actually play on controller.
It's a very, very interesting subject.
Sidebar. Aren't the drivers that the Skullgirl developers made for fight sticks, they made them available and Sony is using them in the PS4.
So they can use any arcade stick, yeah.
With every single frickin' fighter that comes out on, whether it be MKX, Street Fighter 5, Ultra Street Fighter 4.
They're basically making the PS4 the system that you're going to play your competitive fighting games on.
You play competitive fighting games, that you play your Shenmues, that you...
They've made some very, very wise gambles recently. I say gambles, and by that I mean sure things. But back to the bastardization of certain titles. We already said we got Castlevania. We've got what happens now for Kojima if Konami turns around and they say, hey, we're going to make 3 or 4 Metal Gear Solid games. They're going to suck. They're going to be absolutely terrible, but every single person out there is going to buy it because it's still Metal Gear.
I don't know if that's true per se. I think Metal Gear has always been on its merits as a game franchise. There were a couple of PSP games. There's always been.
I played Portable Ops, only Metal Gear Solid I've ever played. I loved it.
Peace Walker.
Yeah,
I heard Peace Walker is really good.
Peace Walker is really good, and I actually did get a console port as part of the HD collection with online multiplayer included, which is great.
Now you say though it's always taken on its merits. I have one argument against that because there was a good Metal Gear game as a side story that wasn't made by Kojima and didn't sell nearly as well, and that's Rising.
Well, that's partially my point. A game will not sell just because it has Metal Gear in the title.
Or Kojima on it.
Right.
But the lack of Kojima was to the detriment of Revengeance in that sense.
Revengeance was actually a really good action game. It just wasn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't to the core of the Metal Gear. Yeah, it was made by Platinum. Wasn't to the core of the Metal Gear fans, which is what I'm getting at. I don't think that you can release just some Metal Gear branded schlock and it'll sell. I don't think that's not like Madden or Call of Duty. I don't think that it works.
So if you went into Vegas tomorrow, because who knows, they may already be there, and you saw a Metal Gear Solid slot machine, because figure that will be coming eventually, because side to sidebar, Nevada recently passed a law allowing skill-based games in games of chance, a move that Konami very publicly applauded. And my theory is because I think eventually you're going to walk into Vegas, see a Castlevania-themed slot machine, and it's going to be like, oh, you get a bonus if you finish the first level of Castlevania on this slot machine.
I think it could happen.
I think it will happen.
Very, very high chance.
I have to be honest and say that is something I'd probably do in that position. Because me being who I am, if I walk into an area, I immediately look for anything video game related.
Of course.
And if I saw video games at a casino, I would end up playing the video games. That's what
I went to Atlantic City. Well, I went to Atlantic City a couple of years ago, and the first thing I went for when I saw the slot machines was this huge Star Wars one. So admittedly, we're all part of American culture. We're all whores to certain brands, obviously. That's just the way our culture fosters our love for things. So, obviously, if you see something that you like if I saw a Suikoden slot machine, first I would be confused, but then I would go probably put all my money into it.
Yeah, but again, that's a specific thing. So, if you were in Vegas, if you're in AC and you see a slot machine or some sort of game of skill and it's a video game that you like, of course you're going to want to go over there at least try it out. But your day-to-day, you're not there. It's more likely going to be mobile games if we ever
more
see
than
something like that. So it's not to say that there isn't such a thing as good mobile game, but it's definitely not where I would want to see
Metal Gear Solid Endless Box Crawler.
Okay. The Hitman one, the
Hitman Go.
Hitman Go was not bad.
And Tomb Raider Go is coming out. That looks good too.
Right.
It does. It does look good.
I love that aesthetic. But digress. But we brought up Street Fighter briefly before. So we're getting away from Konami now, rather. And we want to talk about Capcom for a couple minutes because while they're not a company that seems to be so obviously getting out of traditional video games in the way Konami is, because you look at Konami, the writing's on the wall. They're getting out. Metal Gear Solid 5 is their swan song. They're not making a new Zone of the Enders. They're not making a new Boktai. They're getting out. But Capcom, on the other hand, they're still very much making video games. However, there are titles that are obviously ignored, some titles that almost got ignored, if not for the intervention of Sony, like we brought up before with Street Fighter, like there wouldn't have been a Street Fighter 5 if not for Sony stepping in. But then also Capcom is seeming to pivot on other properties, and also maybe some business practices that maybe not everyone likes, but are definitely serving enough of a consumer base to be profitable. So let's talk first about the most egregious thing that Capcom has done, and that is stuffing Mega Man under the stairs and forgetting he exists. Steve, take it away.
I really want to take it away. Okay, so back in 2010, 2011, right, we had ourselves Mega Man 10. Mega Man 9, Mega Man 10, between 2009 and 2011.
Yes.
Okay, great games. Phenomenal games. Mega Man 9 is actually my favorite Mega Man game right now. So that's this.
Is it better than Mega Man Soccer?
Everything's better than Mega Man Soccer,
You're
except
alive.
for Mega Man Soccer 2, which is just a parody of the original.
Listen,
Anyway.
I think we can all agree Mega Man Soccer is the greatest soccer game ever created because soccer sucks. But move on.
Can we get a Rockman and Bass port real quick? Can we get a translation for like the?
There's a GBA port, and it's also on the Wii U for $7.99
It is on
US
the Wii U.
dollars. Okay. Anyway, Mega Man Universe, which was supposed to come out on Xbox 360 and PS3 at the time, got canceled. Right?
Was that like Inafune's like one of his last things before he left?
Well, there was that. There was you're gonna make me stutter. I had it. Mega Man Universe, Mega Man Legends 3, which they got it
3DS.
so far developed on the 3DS. It was the reason why I bought a 3DS. I bought it because there was a promise of Mega Man Legends 3, and I said that promise is good enough to get me to go out and buy this system. I swear, if Nintendo did not realize how many consoles were going to be sold from that promise alone from Capcom, I mean, I don't know about you guys, that sold the system to me.
It looked pretty far along. Like, I know they kept on saying, we need direct fan support, otherwise this isn't coming, otherwise it isn't coming, but it looked like it was kind of chugging along, and it looked like that they were just kind of pretending to hold it hostage to try to draw up interest, but little did we know that it was actually the other way around, and it looked like they had no intention of really, like...
The game had a ton of people on the boards giving different, like, opinions, designs, character models. They were literally helping with the game. It got to the point of where they had their demo. They were going to release it for like $2 on the Nintendo eShop.
So charging for a
3DS.
demo even, and people were going to line up to pay for it.
Yeah, it was going to happen. And then they just turned around and said, this does not meet our criteria for a good game. And they just chopped it. And then when they were asked about it on Twitter, I don't remember the gentleman's name who said it, through some Capcom username for Twitter. He said that the fans didn't want it bad enough, or that they weren't involved enough in the development.
Which seems like BS considering everything you just said.
Yeah, it's really, really... The fact is, he got torn apart by Twitter that day.
Now, admittedly, while I read a lot of news and stuff, I don't really get deep into communities. I don't read boards. Like, sometimes I read boards, sometimes I read comments just to kind of like laugh at them on a news story or whatever. But it seems like that, at least for this, that you were kind of more involved because it's something you really, really wanted. So was this something like you did pay attention to, like the boards? Did you participate, say, in this campaign?
The Mega Man Legends 3 campaign was something that I followed greatly. I'm actually a member of the Revival group on Facebook, and they're actually celebrating something pretty cool that just happened yesterday, I think. Concept just put out a video called...
Concept, the company that is coming out soon with the Mega Man spiritual successor, Mighty Number 9, a game which I actually just got an email for because I participated in the Kickstarter.
Me too.
What system I want. What did you choose system-wise?
I didn't choose anything yet. I have to get on my email.
Oh, I chose Vita because it's cross-buy with PS3 and PS4, so I'm going to have it on all three of those.
Well, I bought 3 copies, so I'm going to have it on everything ever.
Okay, so choice for you is movie.
Yes.
Okay, so the point is they're making Mighty Number 9 an already very Mega Man spiritual successor. Now, what are they making now, Steve?
Keiji Inafune, in all of his
infinite wisdom.
His infinite wisdom has led him to just say, guess what, I'm going to make Mega Man Legends 3 without calling it Mega Man Legends 3 and include characters who look exactly like the characters from Mega Man Legends.
Oh, so kind of like what they did with Mighty Number 9.
Yes, it's literally going to be palette swaps and different names. But aside from that, the game is probably going to be exactly what he envisioned for it from the beginning.
Now, what is the name of the game, Steve?
Red Ash, which, if you look at it differently, is Redash.
Which is...
Rockman Dash was the name of Mega Man Legends in Japan.
And Japanese companies tend to like wordplay. They're big fans of it, Keiji Inafune being no exception. I mean, if you just look at the original names for rock and roll, treble and bass, like, he always had a certain pattern to naming things, at least in the Japanese version of these games. So also Rockman Dash, Red Ash, Redash. Also, oftentimes, red is, if you look in modern day video games, red is often seen as the opposite of blue. And Mega Man, as we always know, is the blue bomber. It even said on the back of the Mega Man Legends disc on the PS1, the blue bomber is back in 3D or whatever. So if even that is a small thing, and even maybe unthought of, not thought of, it seems like another connection to where we're seeing.
Don't know if you realize this. Keiji Inafune actually said that for Mega Man X, he wanted Zero to be the protagonist. He wanted to change it up, have the red protagonist.
Okay.
So this is finally happening. He's
Okay,
finally
so maybe
getting
I was
his
onto
wish.
something.
He's got his own company. He said, "I'm doing whatever I want, and the fans are gonna love it." And he's correct. I'm going to buy it.
Of course, I'm going to buy it. I just have a couple of questions as you bring things.
I brought things up.
One thing
Hardcore.
about Zero being the originally intended protagonist for the X series, he did get his own series, Mega Man ZX. Was that were those Inafune games or no?
Those were not, as far as I know.
They were not. I'm not sure if he was a part of the team that could possibly have designed it, but it wasn't his story.
No, he was a vice president of Capcom at that time. He was not actually active in any development.
I don't believe he had any input on story at all.
I think at that point he was out of the actual game making part. I think he was an executive.
My concern there being the way level design went in those games was very frustrating to me. I like my pick your 8 robot masters and go. I don't like walking around through a base and talking to NPCs. I just want to play an action.
Now, did you like Mega Man Legends? That's probably the more pertinent question concerning this announcement.
I did.
Even though it's not a pick your robot master and go, even though you're kicking
because it's not a traditional Mega Man game. It's a different formula. So exploration was a part of that game at its core, and it was a lot more compelling. My other question is, for someone who really enjoyed the Mega Man Legend games, but maybe doesn't remember the story, do you think that Red Ash is going to, in some way, kind of pseudo pick up where 2 left off, or they think there's going to be its own story, kind of maybe borrowing elements, but starting fresh so all the newcomers know what's going on?
It would have to be almost a clean break, wouldn't it? Because Mega Man Legends 2 came out on the PS1.
You know how you mentioned play on words, how the Japanese like to do that? Red Ash?
Yeah.
It's not just Re-Dash. My opinion, I don't know if you guys beat Mega Man Legends 2.
I did not beat 2.
All right. Well, let me give you an example of where you end up at the end of that game, just so you have an idea. The campaign for bringing back Mega Man Legends 3 was Get Me Off the Moon. You're on the moon.
I heard about this.
Okay, so you're on the moon. Red Ash also kind of could be Mars.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was going with it. I already sat down and kind of wrote out a little flow chart and stuff. I'm a little crazy.
A little.
I'm hyped. So I think there's a possibility that they're going to have them start a mission on Mars or something, and then bring it back from there, and kind of
So it's going to be Mission to Mars. So Gary Sinise is going to be in this.
It could be.
Okay.
So
That's what you're saying?
Not that directly, but
check my fanfiction page.
Gonna have to take a look now. Thanks. Put me on blast. But all this has happened. Keiji Inafune is getting his stuff going. He's making himself his Mega Man X/Mega Man. He's making both of them.
Is this the first 3D game he's making since leaving Capcom?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
I think it is. I mean, there was his company Inti Creatorware, because he's also involved with them. They made Azure Gunvolt. He's making Mighty Number 9.
Well, you have to consider Recore is also something else his company is, and we haven't seen gameplay footage of Recore yet, so you can't really take away from that. Which one started development first? We don't know. This is the first time that we're seeing information for Red Ash.
Well, because Red Ash definitely wasn't because unless Sony was going to handle it, it's not an E3 thing. It would have been something Sony would hey, we made Mega Man Legends, forget about Mega Man 64. We helped put out Mega Man Legends.
The point is that this year the developers have taken their IPs back. You've got Shenmue, you've got the Castlevania series turning into Bloodstained, you've got Keiji Inafune taking back Mega Man. We're literally getting the stuff that we've been asking for, and the developers just didn't have a good reason to leave their companies until they were kind of forced or given a push.
Yes, but I just want to table that for a second, that point, a hot second. Because also we were talking about Capcom before. And Mega Man was the most glaring thing about it. However, Capcom does have some other stuff going on. They're still in games. Unlike Konami, they're not getting out. They're not cashing out. In this case, Konami is trying to cash in. But Capcom does have other series. Resident Evil, despite itself, still makes a truckload of money.
Resident Evil 6. I played through Resident Evil 6 cooperative with my cousin the entire way through. Now, for someone who likes that really campy horror movie shit, I thought that it was enjoyable, but as a fan of video games, and specifically as a fan of Resident Evil, it is not a Resident Evil game. That was just a
Now, in its defense,
train off the rails.
in its defense, I didn't play the game. I watched a lot of it. The Leon scenario seemed borderline Resident Evil-ish.
Yes.
Whereas the Chris Redfield on steroids sections and
At the end of Resident Evil 5, he punched a boulder into a volcano with his bare hands.
listen,
Spoiler alert. Sorry, internet.
spoiler alert for 5-year-old games. But if that's not anime, I don't know what is. But also, then there was the other one.
It was Wesker's son.
Yeah, and he literally was just punching zombies, right? Whereas Chris Redfield wanted to be a cog, like desperately.
Yeah, I think so. It was clear that at some point in development they were intended to design this. The game is split up into 3 campaigns with 3 different protagonists.
Yeah.
It was clearly meant to be 3 different styles of Resident Evil, where
So they were trying to serve all masters.
yeah, which ended up hurting them in the end. So you had your you had your
Chris
Leon, you had your Leon Kennedy first.
Okay.
And that was more of your straight up
President
like,
Evil.
President Evil. It was that, dark zombie jump scare kind of
It looked kind of claustrophobic.
Raccoon City almost scenario. And then you had your Chris Redfield, which was basically Gears of War.
Yeah, like
And
I said,
with giant monsters. It was straight up Gears of War.
he wanted to be a cog, and instead of Marcus Phoenix obsessing about his dad, replaced that with Jill Valentine.
Right, but then you have, and I can't remember the character's name, but it was Wesker's biological
I want to say
son,
Alexander, but that's probably a lie.
Andor Cohen or something, but he's like infused with the G virus, or I don't know.
But like a
virus
stable
that is.
version of it, right?
Yeah, like he's some kind of superhuman. And it was more of like an action, more like up close and personal combat thing. But each one of them culminated in some sort of unkillable monster chasing you around for 3 hours.
So what you're saying is it was meant to be 3 separate games, or that's what it looked like.
It had a lot.
Go.
It had an improvement on Resident Evil 5's gameplay mechanics by a lot. It had a really cool melee combat system. It got very arcadey very quickly.
I was gonna say all these sound like great games that aren't Resident Evil.
Yeah, like it was just kind of a mishmash of a lot of good ideas that weren't held together by a solid enough central line. It was kind of and the stories crisscrossed. It's kind of like a Tarantino thing where characters would run into each other at different points during the timeline. There was unlockable Ada Long missions, of course. So,
well, hasn't she been in like 3 games as unlockable missions now?
Yeah, and
like she'll never have her own game.
It had that high score mercenary mission.
Well,
from
I mean,
before.
they spun out Mercenaries into its own thing on the 3DS, didn't they?
Yeah.
Could we just not talk about that game?
But again, that's actually kind of back to my point. The series still makes money.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's life there.
They have the movies for some reason still. But
they're on the last one. They called it. This is the last one.
Didn't Saw have like 4 different last movies? I mean, why should Resident Evil be held to that?
So long as Mila Jovovich is still pretty enough.
Well, also she's married to the director, so that's like just some sort of like power couple almost demanding to make a movie.
Give us money, we make a movie right now.
That's not at all how Hollywood works.
Yeah, I have no idea.
All right, well,
but let's move on to
deep. See, we're talking about Deep Down. Can I squeeze that in?
Oh, squeeze it.
Oh,
Capcom,
squeeze it.
Capcom, what happens? Why do you cock tease so?
Oh wait, are we gonna make E3? I have one more thing.
This is from 2 years ago.
Oh, go ahead.
They didn't say it at all at E3. They talked about it.
Didn't they say it was gonna be like a free-to-play game at some point?
Yeah, it was going to be their version of a free-to-play online RPG, and the combat looked like something out of a Dark Souls type of game. and I got really excited for it, and it looked really cool. And then they just went silent 2 years ago, and we didn't hear anything about it at E3.
Well, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I think they said at one point they were having a hard time finding the fund. Like, the development kind of halted because, like, they had what they thought was a great idea, but then as they were developing it, they kind of ran into roadblocks, like just creative roadblocks of, like, how do we make this?
That's how games die in development.
Well, I mean, that's what the problem with The Last Guardian was for a long time. Was that they had a hard time, like, getting the game right. Like, they had, like, this idea. They had their big picture.
I don't know. Free-to-play models are extremely lucrative, so it's like confusing to me that
I've said it before. I spent $300 in Marvel Heroes.
If Capcom can't get this off the ground, it looked extremely promising. It didn't look terribly complicated, but it looked like fun, and it's cooperative, which is a big plus for me.
Okay, so let's get back to... I just want to say a couple quick things. Another way Capcom is still making money and still in games is Monster Hunter. They're big into the Monster Hunter business. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate seems to be the first actual, like, breakthrough in the West. In Japan, it's a cultural phenomenon, Monster Hunter. That's what the kids are playing. It's that and Yokai Watch.
That's what's holding me back from being successful in stateside. Is that how... Here's the thing. When a game gets specifically...
You have thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, because I like Monster Hunter 3, right? Despite the fact that I hate almost everything about it. It has this amazing core mechanic where you team up with your friends with different gameplay styles and you team up to take down monsters. And then you can make weapons and armor out of their carcass. It's awesome.
And they look like the monsters, too. Like, they do a good job of, like, hey, I made this sword from this giant bug monster, and it looks like it came from it.
The monsters are very much alive. They have their own weak points. They don't have a health bar. You have to figure it out. And they give you different tools and stuff.
Yeah, they get, like, all slack. They start, like, drooling. They limp.
Yes. So the problem with it is the barrier to entry is ridiculously high. It's so much grinding. There's so much things to learn. They front load everything. It makes the barrier to entry to most Western players specifically, like, impassable.
I agree. Now, I bought Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. It's the first Monster Hunter game I'm trying to get into. I've always been interested in it because I know it's this, like, phenomenon, and everyone said in reviews and all that, Monster Hunter 4 is the most accessible Monster Hunter ever made. That's not to say it's very accessible, because it's not. I got about 10 hours in, and I feel like I'm at the cusp now. That if I just tip myself over the edge, it's sort of like...
10 hours is completely unacceptable as a entry threshold.
No, but I'm saying that I've gotten through the tutorial stuff.
I have too. I played a lot of Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, and I loved it. Despite the underwater shit that was terrible, I still loved the game. But literally takes 10 plus hours to get the momentum going, and then I stopped playing it. I had a beta key to play 4. I forgot how to play because there's so much involved, and that's hurting it in the West.
Well, it seems like the people who are into it are really into it. But what are you going to say, Steve?
So I love hard games. I love stuff that's ball-breakingly hard, where you have to be like an expert at it in order to succeed. Like that's my jam. I love competitive stuff, all that. And I tried. I really, really tried to like it. The fun factor wasn't there for me. I understand why people like it, because the grinding is fine, because I don't mind grinding in games. But the action itself was very slow.
Yes, it's very methodical. Like, every animation is deliberate.
There's rewards in games that have things like that, where you have to do exactly what you have to do. Maybe I'm hitting a nerve.
As a matter of fact, we're starting to see clones even of it, like Tokuden and stuff like that. They're coming out on Vita, I think, and PS3, and that is very much like a even more Japanese-inspired, almost rip-off of Monster Hunter. But also, like, when I look at Monster Hunter, really, like, in the long view, like, the way I see it as, and this is what's kind of keeping me interested to where I want to get into it, is I'm very much into Diablo. And Diablo is a very immediate type of game. Mm-hmm. Click, 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 loot explosion, move on. I find Monster Hunter almost to be the same loop as Diablo, but stretched out over, like, an interminable amount of time.
So your instant gratification is just...
It's very much stretched out, but I know that, like, if I'm willing to put in the time, that the rewards, similar to like how I feel in Diablo when I get like a new legendary, that like I'm like, yes, I feel badass with this because there's some demon on a fire chain that's like helping me. Like, and I know it's not going to be that flashy, but I know if I put in the time, I will get the rewards. So I feel like I'm like there. Like I feel like I'm staring out over the mountain. The bungee cord is like attached to my ankles, and I just need to like jump off the side.
Well, this is getting back to what I was trying to say. Because if it's a success in Japan and in the niche, Capcom's not going to take a risk and change anything about it.
They've almost painted themselves in a
which
corner.
is shooting themselves in the foot, because you have at the core a fantastic game that they made inaccessible to a wide margin of people who just aren't going to invest that much time in the chance that at some point it might get fun. You need to be able to hook people in immediately. It maybe not get the full experience right off the bat, but they need to make the game accessible and playable and cooperative immediately. And that's not something that it looks like they're going to do, which is a shame, because the game would be a lot more successful if they had done that.
Now, I know you're a big Souls fan. You brought this up before.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard many comparisons over the years now, ever since Demon Souls came out, to where there's a very similar feeling of gameplay, of methodical, unforgiving, almost obfuscated gameplay between the Souls games and Monster Hunter games. Like it seems like the people
It's a fair similarity.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're identical by any means, but you're saying how their lack of accessibility is shooting them in the foot, like hurting them in the long term in terms of penetrating the Western market. It seems, however, though, that the Souls series, which has been accused of every one of those things, seems to be penetrating the Western market in a way now that...
Hardcore.
Exactly, hardcore. It seems to be penetrating that Western market in a way that Monster Hunter is on the cusp of doing.
Here's the big difference. When you start a Souls game, regardless of which Souls game it is, within the first few minutes of gameplay, you have a weapon in your hand and you're engaged in the actual core gameplay mechanic. Whether or not you can get past it, I mean, you know kind of up front.
That's up to your own skill, right?
Yeah, but you know up front if the gameplay itself is something that you would like. You have a taste of it. Monster Hunter is a good hour and a half at minimum of talking to NPCs and having just info dumped on you. You don't get to fight a big monster. If they had started Monster Hunter out, the very first thing you're doing is fighting a monster. They give you a brief combat tutorial, and now you're fighting a monster. And then they dump you back in town, and they explain to you more of what's happening, and maybe have more of a gradual learning curve for all of the very depthy mechanics, the crafting systems, and different items in the game. I think you'd hook a lot more people a lot sooner.
Did you play 4 Ultimate at all?
No, I didn't get.
Because everything you just said, they do.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Now release it on the console so I can get my friends to play.
Well, like, you have access to every weapon at the start in 4 Ultimate.
Well, same thing as 3. You choose who you start with.
They start you with, well, you have access to them all. You change. You don't.
Yeah.
And then also, right away from the board, like, yes, you fight a big monster first, but it's kind of gimmicky, and then you get dumped into town.
Yeah.
Right at the start, though, there are training missions with each weapon.
That's fine. Look, what you posed to me was, why was Dark Souls successful where Monster Hunter is? Partially, it has to do with the subject matter. A big part of it is that Monster Hunter is now exclusively on handhelds, which is not a big thing in the West.
No, I mean, that's where it got big, though. Like, I remember, but again, this is a very Japanese thing.
Yeah.
It first got big on the PSP, because it was on the PS2 originally.
Yeah, it got big on the PS2. I remember when it was on the PS2.
But it didn't sell numbers until it came to the PSP.
Right.
And, like, people were doing those weird claw motions.
Freedom Unite, I think, was the game on PSP, right?
Well, there was Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, but I think the first one was Monster Hunter's second portable. I think it was the one that, like, sold, like, 1 million or something like that for the first time.
It's not that it's an unsuccessful.
No.
It's not in the mainstream.
No, it's definitely not Western successful.
Because you can play Dark Souls without needing to have everything explained to you. Dark Souls explains nothing to you. It's actually the polar opposite. Dark Souls explains nothing to you.
Whereas Monster Hunter explains way too much to you.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I was going to say let's move on to the next topic, unless you have something to add.
well, no, and then I actually meant for that to be brief, but that seems to be our main problem.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to talk about at the end, when it comes to Capcom and their big business practice now, is the whole, and we see with a lot of companies, but Capcom specifically came out and said this is going to be a core pillar of our business now, is the fact these HD upreses. You can't even say HD remakes because last generation was HD, so it's not like they're taking PS2 games and making them HD. But like now we have the DMC PS4 edition.
Do you not remember the Xbox 360 came out and it didn't have an HDMI port?
Yes.
Yes.
No. Yeah.
The first version of the Xbox 360 had AV and component only.
Yeah, and then they had those color stream cables.
Yeah, I'm just saying how terrible that was. Continue.
Yeah, but they're doing now, like they're one of their main pillars of business now is taking their properties and re-releasing them over and over again. Probably prime example at this point being Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 has now been re-released several times over. You can now get it on Steam. You can get it on, I think, PS4, PS3. There's several different ways. I think they're also doing the same thing with they're either out or they're coming out. The GameCube remake of Resident Evil 1 is also being re-released.
Yeah, but see, it's all well and good that people want that stuff and it'll sell well for a certain amount of time. But if you don't innovate, eventually the brand's just going to die. So they can say, hey, we're going to make these games that we know sold already. Fuck it. You can buy it if you want. I'm not buying rehashed products anymore. It's like I'm done with it. Like I bought Halo Master Chief Collection because I got 4 games, multiplayer for all 4 of them.
Well, I was going to say, they did work to that. Like that wasn't just a port job.
Yeah, well, there were issues off the get-go with playing this stuff, but the campaigns worked, and then 4 months later, everything worked.
4 months.
4 months. That's the truth. 4 months later, everything works.
It's still fun.
But yeah, well, that's a big problem with all the games. But I cannot justify going out and buying a game that I've bought, played, beaten, still own, sitting 5 feet away from me, just because they feel like everyone should have an HD copy of a game that they already released years ago. I understand they're going to make money from it, but it's not.
I don't imagine it's idyllic for them. I think it's simply, well, here's an opportunity to make a quick buck to keep us afloat while we work on our next big thing. We're talking about innovation, and we're talking about Resident Evil. We can't ignore the fact that we had Evil Within happen, where Bethesda gave, I forget his name, the guy.
Shinji Mikami.
Yeah, Shinji Mikami had free run, and he made basically his own version of Resident Evil 4/Silent Hill thing that he was so proud of, and it looked so good on paper. And
all that letterbox.
And it turned out to be an extremely mediocre horror game. Not bad, but not good. It wasn't.
Not the second coming of Wesker.
Right. It wasn't going to be. It's not going to be a franchise. It wasn't successful enough.
Didn't like the last DLC for that just come out?
I'm not sure.
Okay, but yeah, no. It seems like the HD re-releases. I mean, they have a high-profile one coming soon. Mega Man Legacy Collection. They're not even doing it internally. Second Ocean is a company here in the U.S. I think one of their workers is a very dedicated video game archivist, Frank Cifaldi, however you pronounce it. He is very dedicated to the preservation of games. It seems like they're almost obsessively going over the first 6 NES Mega Man games and getting like concept art, archival footage, interviews and stuff, and putting them in like a museum section.
Now, I had a big complaint about that, and it's been quashed a little bit, because I have Mega Man Anniversary Collection on Xbox and PS2, right?
Yes.
It's got all 6 original games. It's got 7, 8, and Mega Man Power Fighter 1 and 2. So it's got way more games, and it was $30, I think, when it came out.
Yes.
Which was an amazing deal.
But from what I understand, people who like are obsessed with like pixel perfect emulation, those games were not.
They weren't perfect. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it.
Whereas Second Ocean, like,
yeah,
their big thing is they developed a new emulation engine that's meant to be portable and can be put into various other systems and games and stuff.
Well, the only
to
reason
emulate
why
those things good.
the reason why I've changed my mind is because of the price. Because if you
Yeah,
go
it's
on
cheap.
if you go on Nintendo's eShop and you go to buy any of those Mega Man games, they're $4 each. You buy 6 of them, you're already at $24. Different story. Buying them on this version, even though it's a digital only release, it's $15. It gives you those 6 Mega Man. That's a better deal than what's on the eShop right there with extra content. I can't be angry at them for that. I understand that it's going to come out on Xbox One, PS4 as well.
Yeah. I think they said eventually they want to bring it to the Wii U as well.
I believe it.
That seems easy yet contradictory because then what do they do with those eShop offerings? Because I think they also said, no, I think it actually might be coming to Wii U same time as the PS4 and the Xbox, and it's eventually also coming to 3DS.
3DS is what's supposed to be fall, and
Yeah.
the Xbox and the PS4 is supposed to be August, from what
Yeah.
I've heard. But the $15 price point is what sold it. That's what sold it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a value offering when it comes out. And I think the Resident Evil 4 remake and the Resident Evil 1 remake, I think for $15 or $20 also. Like they weren't repackaging something and charging $60 all over again. Like they're doing that with DMC, but that's like a newer game, and maybe a lot of people missed it because I don't think it sold particularly well.
That was Ninja Theory that made that. It wasn't in-house from Capcom.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like that was their new Dante with their.
They even took a shot at the original Dante in the very infamous clip with the mop.
Yes. I just did hand motions that translates really well to radio.
That's why I laughed. I thought they would get something out of that.
Yes.
All right, so we're down to our final 2 topics for the day. Let's go to early access games on Microsoft and Steam.
We could do a whole episode on early access.
All right, well, you want to save it?
No.
How about you just touch it? Let's see what it tickles.
Should I touch it?
Just touch it and see what it tickles.
You guys want me to touch it?
Touch early access.
Go.
Touch it.
Do it.
Early access. Early access Steam versus early access Microsoft. I'll say one thing. Microsoft is definitely going to be very controlling about what goes on. Steam not so much controlling, which is usually worked in Steam's favor, but generally the quality assurance process is not quite there.
Well, it seems like Steam has almost lost control of its own ecosystem to a degree with Steam.
Yeah.
Valve has lost control, rather.
I would agree with you. I think actually the refund system is crucial to weeding out the success of some of these really half-assed kind of Unity engine thrown together in an afternoon games.
Buy my Twine game in early access.
Yeah, it's really, really kind of an epidemic. And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, but personally, and this is like, early access is a sort of crowdfunding because you could put your unfinished product up for sale and people will give you real money for some part of a game that requires you to say, give no deadline. It requires no deadline. Most of these games are in quote-unquote early access development
Alpha,
indefinitely.
maybe, yeah. But maybe they're in alpha with plans to soon go to beta, but not even that all the time.
Some games do get frequent updates, and it's a different thing. I don't like the term early access because it implies that at some point you'll have a finished product.
Where there is no guarantee of that.
Right, and it's just throwing money for an alpha or a beta version of the game. I think it should just be called continuing development, and you're just buying whatever part of the game, whatever point that game is developed to, you're buying into it so that you can play it. The one merit it has over something like a Kickstarter is that you do get to get some sort of product.
Yeah, you get something.
But before the refund was in place, you were really just gambling.
Now, have you bought any early access games?
Most certainly have.
What would you say is the most successful early access game you purchased? On Steam specifically. We'll get to Xboxes in a little bit because that's like a brand new thing that's still only in the preview program.
There's a lot. And it's kind of hard to say. I want to say the most successful one on Steam is DayZ.
Okay, yeah, that game is still getting a lot of
I played the Arma.
press, good and bad.
I played the Arma 2 mod, DayZ.
Okay,
So I didn't actually buy the early access release on DayZ. I still haven't done that because
so you were like essentially the person playing Dota on Warcraft 3 compared to.
yeah, I'm just trying to say like I got into DayZ when it was still a mod, and I played it. I really no, I didn't mean it that way.
I know.
Before it was cool,
No,
I was playing.
when it was cool, because I'm not that good at that kind of modding and stuff. So
Your glasses frames are getting thicker as we speak.
I was able to. I'm just saying I was able to do it in an extremely buggy situation.
Yeah.
It was a really cool concept. I liked the concept of open world permadeath, scrounging for survival. The game itself is barely playable. And based on that experience, I wouldn't actually spend any more money on it. But I have spent money on games very similar, like Rust.
Yeah, I was gonna say the survival game is the new hotness.
Right, but I want to give credit for that to Notch and to Minecraft.
Well deserved credit.
Because really, before there was early access, there was Minecraft.
I bought the alpha of Minecraft. I played it once, never played it again. So yes.
But Minecraft is that open world survival game. It is the proto. It was before DayZ.
Well, you can see it was wildly successful. Notch has a candy room.
Yeah, I mean it's successful and it's on every single platform that you can conceive of.
Oh, I'm pretty sure you could program it onto a microwave display.
Yeah, it's on everything from smartphones to the Wii U. It's out there.
Hell, Microsoft bought it and they're still supporting the Sony versions.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. So early access kind of had its early successes, right? Because technically it was early access, even though it wasn't the.
Have you bought any early access games that just have fallen on their face?
Most certainly, and Rust is one of them. Because Rust was cool, but it's very unfinished, and it just is going to stay that way. It's still in early access. I bought it 2 years ago.
But are there updates still coming to it? Like, have you bought any games that have been obviously abandoned? Because there's been a few.
Duke Nukem.
But I don't.
Those games for me.
Here's the thing about it. I don't keep up with it so much.
Okay.
So it's whatever I'm playing in the moment, and I now know enough to go. I'm buying an early access game. I want to play it at this point, and I'm not buying it to play it when it's finished. So one of the big things is when it gets its buzz, be it like Rust or be it like
Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, Darkest Dungeon or what's that zombie shooter game that's really popular? It's the sequel. I can't think of it all of a sudden. That's terrible.
The sequel to the zombie shooter?
Yeah, it was.
The one that you play on
with. God, it's the guys that did Red Orchestra.
I don't.
And the ball. And, oh my God.
We play games.
Well, I played a million. I played it a million hours.
They play games, but we don't remember their names sometimes.
So many games.
Okay.
Many games. Basically, what I'm getting at is early access. You generate a buzz. You have a success. You're still in early access, but you have that. You're at the tip of the bell curve, and after that, your notoriety and your success goes down, even though you're still working on the game. At some point, it just doesn't pay to finish that game anymore. You just then stick a 1.0 stamp on it and say, oh, this is final release, or do you let it fall to the wayside because there's no obligation to release the actual game. You've made your money on it.
You made your money, and then you're hoping that maybe if you put it out for realsies, that another wave comes. It almost has to work as almost. I see the way that early access works the best is if. And I've seen this with Darkest Dungeon, is probably the best example to me. I see that the early access title gets almost these evangelists in more mainstream gaming press sites and stuff like that. Like you have Kat Bailey over at US Gamer. She will talk about Darkest Dungeon a lot. So she almost keeps it in the public consciousness. But yeah, it could definitely be a double-edged sword because the game could come out, could never come out. They make all their money while still in development, and they may not be able to catch that lightning in a bottle again.
So I'm going to approach Microsoft, their early access program, very, very cautiously, but I do have an interest in, for example, this is a game that didn't show up at E3, even though we kind of already saw some gameplay footage through Kotaku. They had an anonymous leak. Phantom Dust. If Phantom Dust came to early access, one of my favorite games of all time, I would be on that so fast. One of my
Phantom
favorite.
Dust is never coming out.
That's where I was going with that. Is that Phantom Dust now is probably not going to come out unless they find a new developer. But the way things are looking, it's not. So there it is.
Yeah, no, the Microsoft is still, like I said, it's still in the preview program. It's still, like, very new. It's still, we don't know if it's going to work.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot more on this subject. There's a lot of meat on this bone. I'd love to get into it more, but we are running a bit long here. I think we should wrap it up.
Okay. So, again, you can find us on the internet. We are on Twitter. They Play Games, TPG Podcast on Twitter. I'm at Ray's Gaming Rants.
At FS_SNKO.
Did you get a Twitter yet?
I don't have a Twitter yet. I'm in the Stone Age still.
God damn it.
Well, you know, we have electronics here. We can get you going.
I actually, a little tease, something brewing, and I'll share with you guys when I actually have something to share.
Okay. Also, I'm starting to stream on Twitch more. My Twitch channel is also Ray's Gaming Rants. I just started, like I said earlier, doing Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky. I call it JRPGs After Dark. I'll be most likely playing, at night in various forms of sobriety. And otherwise, if you want to email us, you can find us at tpgpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also find our YouTube. Just search for They Play Games TPG Podcast, same thing, because it is hooked up to the Gmail account. Until next time, we are They Play Games, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.